Right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for reconvening, because you'll recall we adjourned our meeting from the 23rd last Tuesday, where we didn't deal with the resolutions because we recognised at that stage that there were changes further to be made, and in effect Ken and Leon requested that we adjourn the meeting so those changes could be made. And we're very appreciative of the hard yards that have gone on since then. And our intent was to re-adjourn or to reconvene today. Now, what that has meant, of course, obviously, is that we have a new annual report, a new summary report, and importantly, we have a new memorandum and some adjusted resolutions that we are being asked to receive as a major late item. So that's what we'll go through with the care of both Ken and Leon. But look, before I do, and I realise my form is poor, do we have any apologies to receive for this meeting? We look like we've got a full crowd, don't we? But I haven't received any apologies. We've got a full muster. It's a dumb question asking those that are mustered, but as far as I know, we're all here, so that's superb. Okay, so there's no apologies. Are there any matters of interest that members might have with this item? Thank you. I don't presume that there is. So I'd like to move to a recommendation discussion, which is basically that this is a major late item with a recommendation, which I'll just read out. It's one that I propose to put to the meeting, that the Audit and Risk Committee consider the additional tabled information report, which includes an updated annual report and updated summary annual report, and the further updated annual report 2020-21 and the further updated annual report summary 2021 at this meeting as major late items not on the agenda pursuant to section 46A 7A of the Local Government Official Information Meetings Act and Meetings Act 1987 to enable the 2021 annual report to be adopted. So short as it, we want to receive these as major late item. I move that. Roger, thank you. You second. I'll put it, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. So that brings us then to the report. And Ken, I suspect you first before we ask Leon to speak to the various aspects of the audit, if that makes sense. I'm in your hands.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. Look, Bruce, you've introduced the item very, very well, and particularly in regard to the multiple copies of the annual report and summary annual report that are on the agenda. And my apologies on behalf of myself and the team that this has ended up getting a little bit messy, particularly with one additional set that did come through to you this morning. But look, essentially where we're at is on Friday afternoon we did get a clearance from Audit New Zealand on our annual report and our summary annual report document. So look, that was fantastic. Obviously to receive that. What we discovered yesterday was that that there was some very, very minor changes that had been requested last week that we somehow missed in the process, and that explains the second sets of those documents that were circulated and part of the agenda this morning. As Bruce has pointed out as well, we've and in fact you've just passed that late item resolution, but in the memo that proposed the recommendation for the consideration of the late item, there are some tweaks to the intended resolutions that will make it that will make sure that we capture all of the changes that are in front of us. All right. So look, I did just want to point out to you, and in effect, in a moment, we'll just pass on to Yolanda. But the tab that is entitled "Additional Tabled Information Report," perhaps if you just go to that, because it is important that we do cover off on this. So look, this I guess principally relates to the very final changes that came about as part of the audit process. Well, actually, it's mainly due to the audit process, but also some changes requested by the Audit Risk Committee committee members from our meeting. This meeting when it first started last week. So look, the finance team staff have set out all of those changes that happened and that happened to the document. Those are all set out on the table. And what I'm just going to do now is just pass over to Yolanda just to talk through the 2 or 3 of the more major ones of those, the ones that have really impacted the numbers, just so that the committee does have a good understanding of that. So Yolanda, in your hands, just to talk us through those biggies.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. So just high level, the majority of the changes related to the loss on disposal of the roading asset adjustments that we discussed last week, Tuesday. So one of the big changes was a 6.1 million adjustment. So what had happened is we had accounted for it in the profit and loss in the 2020-2021 financial year, where the transaction should have been recognized against the revaluation surplus because those assets had been revalued in previous years. So that was one of the big adjustments. And then the prior period error note had also changed based on recommendations received from audit. And then as the note 32 also includes a table for council only numbers and then group numbers. A further change was just on the road and footpath costs. So there was a 24 million drop between the set that you initially saw for the 23rd of November towards the in comparison to the final one that you see now, and that is the 17 million difference that was in the prior period error note 32, as well as the 6 million that I just spoke about earlier. Other than that, I'll take questions from the committee on any other matters that they would like to raise.
Thanks, Roger. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bruce. That chart that we've got there, in some instances, you indicate changed from a figure to a figure, and then in others, you've just got updated.
The total.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more helpful to me to understand if you'd adopted the same principle of from to, and then we could see the quantum of difference. I think that would have made it easier to understand.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Roger. Appreciate that. And thank you, Yolanda, that you've explained it. Other folk got questions for Yolanda for the key change? At the risk of talking too much, we remember this was the debate we had last week about understanding the need for the change, which was the essentially double counting of assets, which became clear as we did effectively the stock take to enable the revaluation to occur. And given it occurred, you'll recall, over a number of years prior to the current year, we've accepted that we have made an error, and accounting standards would require us to adjust our opening balance so that we start the current year we were putting on 2021 on the right position, so that our normal annual transactions go ahead as normal, arriving at the safe place we are at 30 June 2021. Are there any other questions folk would have? Ken, yes.
Yeah, so Bruce, I think it's probably just worth pointing out, and I'll just really quickly go through this. But to those that prior period change, obviously that happened, has actually changed the face of the statement of comprehensive revenue and expense quite markedly. So so look, I'm looking here at page 549 of the agenda. So the statement of comprehensive revenue and expense, if everyone can just really quickly go to page 549, I think it's it is important to note that with the removal of a very significant write down in those assets, particularly the roading assets, that what has resulted is our operating surplus has jumped right up on a council parent basis up to 39.6 million, and of course that was against a budget of 26 million. So look, we've our operating surplus has ended up being $13 million above what was budgeted. It was actually budgeted to be quite a significant figure anyway at 26.5 million, right up now to 39.6. In terms of some of the key drivers in that, I guess if you raise your eyes a bit further up the page, a lot of that is about, well, a lot of the actual surplus itself, as well as these, the jump up to 39.6 is relates to non-cash items and very much growth items. So, for instance, vested assets we budgeted at 15 million. The actual there is 21.8 million. So that speaks to the growth in the district. Obviously, it also very specifically includes quite a substantial figure for the new Waikeria prison pipeline. That has come through as a vested asset in this period. So that's obviously quite significant. Subsidies and grants, you can see that's up 7 million from budget. There was some extra subsidy from the NZTA or Waka as they're now known. That came in, and of course we got that Three Waters subsidy money as well from the government. So quite a jump up there. Even in terms of fees and charges, in terms of the growth story, about I believe about $1.3 million of additional building consent fees and resource consent fees as our growth has continued unabated. So look, these are big numbers, and like I say, the numbers are significantly higher than what were budgeted, and in fact significantly higher than earlier drafts of this annual report, because previously these things that I'm talking about now were dampened down by quite a large write-off, which has now been reclassified as a prior period adjustment. Okay, but that's the profit and loss statement, or the comprehensive revenue and expenses. Go on a couple of pages to the statement of financial position. And I guess just in terms of a really high level summary, you can see now that we've now got total assets of nearly $2 billion. You can see that total asset line is sitting now at, and again, I'm just referring to the parent council rather than the group numbers, $1.968 billion. And of course, total equity, so the ratepayer equity in this organisation is now $1.85 billion. Obviously our assets are significantly higher than what our liabilities are. So we now have to, even despite the fact that our borrowings have increased substantially, we're now up to $98 million. Obviously that $118 million of total liabilities pales in comparison to the $2 billion of assets. So look, just a really high level commentary, I suppose, on those key financial numbers.
Thank you for that, Ken. That is that's very helpful and very wise to draw our attention to. Even though we understood the changes, to see them in the final flush is really important for us as members to take on board. Yes, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Bruce. And I'm just wanting to ensure that my understanding of these changes that were brought about by these discovered or non-discovered assets that made that change, the difference from 26 to 39 million as an operating surplus actually occurred in a number of separate years prior to last year. So however many, back to, what did you say, 1947 or something like that. So that's a lot of years. So they were just a progressive accumulation of the changes that were made over that time.
Oh, yeah. Look, so through the chair, just in response to that statement, Roger. So in terms of those prior period errors, the key thing to keep in mind is that they don't turn up anywhere on page 549, because in fact what they were was prior period errors dating way back, as you mentioned, as far back as 1947 in some cases. So they have been dealt with as effectively a balance sheet adjustment only, and they do not hit the statement of comprehensive revenue and expense at all. So and note 32 of the financial statements explains that and explains what the numbers are. Happy if anyone else wants to comment in that regard, but and actually showing these things as or treating them as prior period errors as the accounting standards require us to, is essentially what that means is we do actually have a nice clean statement of comprehensive revenue and expense, because the stuff that is in the statement of revenue and expense is quite correctly matters that only relate to the 2020-21 financial year, as it should do. That other stuff has been treated separately.
Okay.
Roger, I would refer you to page 616 of 719. It's almost like dollars, isn't it? Our paging numbers. There you will see the upgraded note, which reflects all those cumulative changes up to the end of last financial year, 30 June 2020, and you can see the 17.911 million, which is the cumulative adjustment that was made to essentially the 2020 closing balance, so that we could have indeed what Ken has just described as a clean year in terms of our 2021 financial performance and therefore balance sheet. So that's where all those changes from 1947 onwards have been effected. Yes, okay. Andrew.
Sorry.
Oh, Roger, if you're going to need clarification, that's fine, then I'll go to Andrew.
Yeah, no, it was just, there were two components. One was the asset change, which I understand is a balance sheet item, but then there was a change to depreciation claimed, which is a P&L item. Does that still come through as a prior period adjustment on the balance sheet, but no change to P&L?
So look, there's been no change to the current year depreciation. As part of the prior period adjustment, which was basically correcting those asset numbers, there were some adjustments to historic accumulated depreciation, and in effect also to historic revaluation reserve entries. So we changed the actual value of the assets, or disposed of value of assets, as well as revaluation reserves and accumulated depreciation balances, but not at any point did we make any adjustments for current year depreciation. Current year depreciation is as it is.
So if you're referring back to the conversation we had last week, Roger, the rating impact of this error is, we agreed, most likely small, albeit cumulatively, it comes to a bit over time. But it's happened also in those preceding years. So that's when the rating impact of this was felt. In other words, when we were counting them as assets and we didn't have them, and if we had, we rated for them in terms of depreciation. But that's not affecting the current year. That's been a challenge. It's an issue that's affected the prior years, not this year.
Yeah.
Andrew, you had a question, sir?
Well, not really, just through you, Bruce. I was just going to say that even though the 39.6 surplus is significantly more than budgeted, it is in fact a correct reflection of the year's activities, because the prior period adjustment was adjusted in a prior period. So, I guess there may well have been a very small effect on the depreciation because the assets being depreciated were somewhat reduced, but that would be negligible. So, thanks.
Right. Are there any more questions folk would like to raise then? It depends how you've approached it, but I mean, essentially, we did a very effective review. I want to thank you for that, a very effective review last Tuesday about the totality of the accounts. Ken's raised and Yolanda's raised with us the key changes. I would note that on the late item, Ken's noted the changes that he's made as a result of the very valuable input from particularly you, Susan, and Claire. Can I ask members, and are you comfortable with these accounts as they stand at the moment before I ask Leon to speak? Susan.
I picked up a couple more, sorry to be a pest.
No, that's fine. Go for it, Susan. That's why we have to come to this committee.
There is a reference. I'll start with the easy one. It's a small typo on page 500. Limited has 2 I's in it in terms of yes. Where are we? Here we go. Aeronautic Investments Limited. So it's just a little typo. The next one is on pages 714 and 715, the glossary, which I didn't even notice was there until late last night. Very bizarre explanation and by way of a definition for, firstly, the community boards. Seems a really odd thing to describe a community board in that way, especially when there's actually a description of what they are in the text of the report. And then the next one over the page is Te Kohanga Nui or Waikato, and I know nothing about that. Perhaps I'm showing my ignorance or stupidity. I've never heard of it, and I've Googled, done a universal search, and it's not appearing anywhere else in the document, so I'm wondering its relevance for our glossary. Claire, you're looking like you might know something about that.
Its name's been changed. I'm familiar with it. It used to be that, but I'm sure it's got a new name now, and like Linda Te Awa is the chair of it, but I don't know what the new name is.
It's not referenced anywhere in that document beyond the glossary, so I'm kind of wondering its purpose for being there.
Yeah, so through the chair, can I maybe suggest, in effect, and maybe this is something we need to look at next year in terms of whether this glossary is actually fulfilling a purpose. But look, I would suggest actually with both the ones that you've mentioned at this late stage, Susan, that probably the easiest thing is just to remove those references.
Yeah.
As you say, I think people do know what the community boards are. So so let's remove that one, and look if the other entity is not referred to anywhere else at all, because I take it from your comment you've probably done a search of the document, electronic search of the document. Look, let's strike a line through that as well. It's clear. I don't think either of those references or those definitions are adding any value.
Can I just comment that I'm pretty sure it relates to the member of the Pirongi Award Committee, because we do have iwi reps on that, and I see that that's on. I'm looking at page 92. Oh, sorry, it's at 32 of my agenda, which is probably the old version. But the first paragraph under the Pirongi Award, it talks about a representative of Te Whakakitenga or Waikato. So that's probably the new name.
Oh, okay then, right. Okay, but look, I think at this late stage, certainly my recommendation to the chair is that let's lose both those items out of the glossary.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think that's uncomfortable because again it just proves Susan's point, Claire, that the reference, particularly to the iwi organisation, is redundant because it isn't used and doesn't exist. And we do have the correct reference then, if I understand it correctly, in the Pirongi Award Committee. So little is lost at this stage,
And
as far as I can see.
Cool. And the last one little thing was on page 491, the introduction from the Mayor and Chief Executive. I accepted that is replicated in the, and so that's the, because there's a mirror, isn't there? There's a summary and then there's the report.
Yes.
One of them, it has been amended, but the amendment hasn't carried through to remove the reference to working with our treaty partners. So it appears there on page 491, but then on page 529, it doesn't. It's the correct one. It says instead, we're guided through our partnership with Mana Whenua and have committed to create a new Māori award so we can better represent our residents for greater collaboration, inclusivity, openness and transparency.
As
opposed to the wording on page 491.
Yes, which I think the 491 is the summary, right? So we need, it's just taking the agreed, well, I think what we're agreeing is the change through to the summary document.
Yeah, cool. But they're the only ones I could pick up.
Brilliant, well done. I'm really impressed about the look at the glossary, Susan. That's seriously, I'm very appreciative that you've had that attention to detail. Right, well, thank you with that. So, Leon, I think it would be reasonable to ask you to come in here, please, and I guess give us the current position where you're at, and clearly we want to have a quick chat about the opinion and the letter of rep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. There are quite a few councillors I would not mind having on my audit teams talking about attention to detail and picking up things and asking really good questions. So thanks for that.
Does that include me, Leon, or have you fired me?
No, Bruce. You've got competition at the moment.
Exactly.
So we've now finished our audit and we're ready to issue unqualified audit opinions on the financial statements and the statement of service performance. And we've included a draft of the audit report. I prefer to include a final signed version. The reason it is in draft because the page numbers have been changing since I sent it through, but I wanted councillors to and the committee to have a look at it first before we sign a final version, which we'll do as soon as we get the final signed and adopted annual report and signed letter of representation.
Right. So, Leon, there's nothing that you need to add. Obviously, you've shadowed the process that we have gone through. I'm just trying to remind me, can somebody remind me of the page number that your opinion's on, please?
I've got a very short version of the Audit Risk Committee, so I'll have to leave that over to Yolanda or Ken.
Yeah, so Bruce, I can help out with that. So the audit opinion is page 249 of the agenda. Right,
brilliant. Just about there. Okay. Thank you for that, Leon. So members, if you can go to 249, you can see again the opinion that we want, which is essentially an unqualified or unmodified opinion reflecting the financials and non-financials are right. And there are a couple of disclosure points here that follow on page 250. And also on 250, we have the emphasis of matter, which is, as Leon explained on Tuesday, essentially is a standard emphasis of matter that all local government is getting, at least certainly those since generally, it's a technique used by the auditor where they aren't qualifying or modifying their opinion on the financial statements, but are saying, hey, reader, look at a key piece of information that's being provided by the district council, which of course is clearly the longer term view that a reader may form of Waipa needs to be considered in this context, I think would be the way I'd put it, Leon. Look, the rest I have read through, and I presume you folk have too, but reflect the basis and indeed the independence of Leon as he has conducted that. Is there any questions for Leon on that? What other than the emphasis of the matter, but in some sense this year it is the standard audit opinion. Any questions for Leon? If we then go over to page 255 of 719, we have the letter of representation, which Jim and Gary are being asked to sign. It's proffered to us by the auditor, but it's been written from our perspective. So this is genuinely a letter that has been written by Waipa District Council to Leon as the auditor, representing a range of things. It's quite a serious letter. And I just want to again draw attention to this. Leon, just for the sake of the committee, this is a standard letter of representation. You haven't asked for any additional or modified or specific representations in this letter?
No, absolutely, very standard.
Right. So it's reflecting that we understand the nature of the opinion. We've just gone through that. But if you go to 256, there are a number of things that we're recognising as our responsibility. And indeed, we then make a range of representations around the financial statements and about the information that is provided. I'm always conscious that it's things like we are comfortable that all misstatements, the only misstatements left are immaterial. We have to form that view ourselves. None of the information has been subject to material fraud. There are those sorts of things. So, Ken, Gary, I wonder if we could just have a short discussion. There's nothing here that from your operation of the day-to-day aspects of the council would in any way endanger this letter being signed. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, so Bruce, look, I have read through the letter. I'm comfortable with the letter that the representations that we're making are valid and appropriate. Each I have, I believe, Leon, I may have picked up a typo in the letter though. So let's just clarify that before we get it signed. So page 260 of the agenda, it's the last page of the rep letter. Yeah, you've got a date in there in relation to the going concern. And you're seeking assurances in regard to the period of 1 year from the 9th of November. Now, I suspect that's because at one point we were looking to sign the annual report off, or of the annual report on the 9th of November.
If only,
yeah,
Leon.
I think that probably should be updated to the 30th of November. You want that that 1 year period from the 30th. Is that correct?
Yes, please, Ken, and well spotted. When I read through it now, I got to 9 November and I thought, what happened here? And you're quite right. That was the original signing date this year. So please, if we can make that one change, and well spotted.
Yeah. So apart from that, through the chair, I think it is more than appropriate for Jim and Gary to sign this.
Gary, you're comfortable?
Yes, Mr. Chair, nothing jumped out at me as being something I need to be concerned about, or Jim, in signing this letter.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. That's great. Okay, Leon, is there anything else? I haven't arranged for us to have time with you, which possibly might be remiss, and appreciate that, but there is no need for us to have a session without staff here. You're comfortable that you've had the chance to tell us everything that you need to?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and you know me well enough to know that I will ask for alone time if required. At this stage, good practice suggests maybe next year we need one meeting again where we can have a discussion with our management, but that's just a process. Yeah, I think the audit went as well as it could have under the circumstances from both sides.
We'll certainly have that time with you when we receive your management report on this audit. So don't be worried about that. Hopefully by then we're actually all in the same building, which will be superb. Okay, members, I'm in the position where I think we can turn our attention to the resolutions that go through as a recommendation to council. But before I do that, is there any other comment members of the committee would like to make at this point? Yes, Claire.
I'd just like to thank Ken and Yolanda, like they were doing those late changes, or the ones that didn't come through yesterday. Really appreciated them working on that to make sure that we had it all in time for today. Yeah.
Well done. I see the thumbs up there. Look, it is clear at time, and we do need to thank Ken and Yolanda and indeed the whole team for their delivery. Extenuating circumstances, which are all massive issues that have flown around the society, which are beyond both Ken and indeed Leon's control. So I appreciate that. And look, it would be remiss, Claire, if we didn't also thank you, Leon, and your team. We're particularly aware of the circumstances the audit profession faces in New Zealand, and we're obviously at a timing different to that which we would normally expect and be able to deliver on mutually. So thank you that you have got us to this point, and as I say, some fairly odd circumstances, so hopefully not to be repeated. Right, can I just then move us to the recommendations? And Joe, just to make certain that I am on the right page, while you sent me a run sheet, I am looking at page 718 of 719 of the agenda. So these are short of the recommendation A, which I will just cover off quickly. The outstanding motions that were proposed at our adjourned meeting on last Tuesday. Okay, so if we've been able to pursue the agenda fully last week without adjournment, these would have been the resolutions that I would have sought the committee's agreement with. So I think if you want to check on that, if you go back to page 7 of 719, you will see the original resolutions as they stood. What we have from Joe and Ken is an amended set. So A, which still needs to, well, what I propose to do, let's do this properly, is we have a recommendation here for an amended resolution, which I will go through and put. When we accept that as the amendment, we will then go back to page 7 and deal with the totality of the 3 motions. The only one missing is to be received. So the committee consider the draft, so I'm on page 718, the committee consider the draft Waipā District Council annual report, including all amendments tabled at this meeting. So to be specific, that includes some of your good points. Thank you, Susan and Ken, the changes that we've agreed to make, and with inclusion of the tabled amendments, which again goes back to, gee whiz, I'm stretching my page numbers there, but were the adjustments, the prior period error, etc., and unmodified opinion be received from Audit New Zealand. The committee recommends the draft annual report for 2021 to Council for adoption and publication pursuant to Section 98 of the Local Government Act at its meeting on the 23 November, which was the original motion, but now is continued on 30 November 2021. The second amendment is included in page 719, which is a very similar worded resolution, but it relates to the summary, which effectively we've also dealt with. And Susan, for instance, you've raised today when we've looked for consistency in terms of the Mayor and Chief Executive's report between the two documents. So to do that, what I would recommend is that I put that the original motion, I'm treating this as an amendment, effectively be adopted to become the substantive motion, and we'll go back to page 7 and include it with with motion A. So I'll put the motion that we accept this as an amendment to our original motion. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Roger. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. So if we go back to page 7, please, of our agenda, you will see the original motion B and C have now been substituted with what we have just passed. But now we have also recommendation A that the information be contained. The amendments go through as the standard part of the motion again. I'll put that motion. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roger. Is there any discussion on the motion? I think we've done well. I'll put the motion then, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
I think it should be a resounding aye, shouldn't it? Aye. Great. Good to hear. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Well, Ken and Leon, again, Claire has quite rightly said thanks to you. I presume you've got a council meeting to go to now to actually formally adopt and formally receive the opinions. So again, I just want to reflect Claire's thanks to both your respective teams. And look, on my behalf, can I just say thank you to my colleagues here as well, starting from, well, I mean, always, but actually starting with our meeting last week. I was impressed with the review and the questioning that you folk did. I'm very grateful. Susan and Claire, I think you were our hawkeyes on detail, and I do appreciate that as well. As Leon said, if you want to change in career, he's got an offer you can't refuse, I suspect. So thank you to my colleagues also for doing that. I wish you well for your meeting to adopt this. And I hope you folk can all enjoy the fact later this evening. Perhaps no more than you, Ken, Yolanda and team, and Leon and team. No other business then, as far as I understand. I'd like to...
Just the thanks to you, Bruce, for guiding us through all of this. So thank you very much.
It's always a good day when something's being brought to conclusion, Jim. So so that is fine. So look, thank you for that, Jim. I do appreciate that. But it's always great doing business with Waipā. Okay, folks, thank you for that. You have a good council meeting, and I wish you well, and I'll declare the meeting closed.